Hello and welcome to this episode of CultureShock, our video series about organisational culture, company culture, and what we can do as leaders, as coaches, as people who care about the places that we work to look after our company culture in these very strange times. My guest today is Gavin Drake, the owner of Mindspan. Gavin, would you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely, and good afternoon, Rebecca. I'm director of a coaching and training organisation called Mindspan, and I've been doing that for about 22 years. Decided to kick that off in the late 90s, and over the last 20 or so years, worked all over Britain and Europe and other parts of the world, sharing a whole load of mental performance principles and philosophies, really, and linking that to culture as well too, Rebecca.
Brilliant. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this at the moment, Gavin, because I think that we're recording this on the 1st of June. There are changes today, but lockdown is still in place. And the last couple of months have not been par for the course for any of us, really. And I think that it is a simple way of putting it is that we've all been under pressure in different ways. And so what I'd love to hear from you about is how you are advising organisations to look after their culture and to look after their people. Where do you start with them when such crazy things are going on in the world?
Yeah, it is a really fascinating one, Rebecca, because that pressure that you mentioned, or the challenge around all of this, it's new, and it's a human response, isn't it? When we're faced with something we haven't been faced with before, or a more extreme version of anything we were faced before, and there isn't absolute certainty that's all going to finish next week and it's going to end up like X, Y, or Z. There are so many unknowns. That's where the uncertainty comes from. It's where the anxiety comes from, that perceived pressure. And we were discussing before kicking off today that actually that's where a lot of the challenge and issue comes from with people, and it's testing. I think it's really testing for us all individually. That's as people, members of society, our families, and of course our workplaces and our organisations. It's I'm a massive believer we get tested. We are tested when we face big challenges, and we really find out what we're made of. And I don't just mean in a motivational striving to get there sort of way. I just mean in terms of what we really believe in and what we say our values are and how we want to conduct ourselves and how we want to treat others. It's easier to demonstrate those things when we're not really under strain or stress. Absolutely. We're under a lot of strain and stress to varying degrees, and it's a real test, I think, for us. So going back to your question around our sort of clients and the conversations we're having, my first role is actually to sort of get a gauge on where they're at. Do they feel very resourced at the minute? Do they feel on top of things, or do they feel overwhelmed by everything? And I guess that level of empathy I need to have firstly to understand what their experience is, because not everyone's is the same, quite obviously.
Do you know, it's interesting because I would say that that's similar to me in my role at Fountain, looking after people, because as I'm calling my team members, everyone is on a different journey. And interestingly, I'm pretty sure that if I made the same call at 4 different times during the day, I would find people on different spaces of the roller coaster. So, and I experience it myself at the minute. There are moments where I feel like, yeah, this is absolutely fine. I'm on top of this. I'm managing it. Everything's different, but we're there. And there are other times that I just burst into tears because I broke a mug or something ridiculous. And I think that unknown of the situation, we're all dealing with it as leaders, as team members. Everyone is in a different space than they expect it to be, and that's not easy, is it?
No, it isn't. And I've got a few clients that early in lockdown would, I think making some great decisions around if they'd furloughed a lot of employees. I've got a particular client in mind. They employ about 200 people. Because of the nature of the industry they're in, it was shutting down, and they didn't know for how long, and thank goodness quite quickly the Chancellor put in place the furlough scheme, because they furloughed most of their employees, and hopefully they'll be sort of coming back sort of fairly soon. And that particular owner leader, I thought did some great work early, because they decided to put out regular videos, recorded short 5-10 minute videos as the leader and owner of the business to, I guess, to try and reassure people, but obviously trying to reassure their staff without being able to have facts always to reassure them with. But I guess the reassuring bit comes from a leader who looks like they're okay. They're not running around, like a headless chicken panicking. But the challenge, I had those discussions with that client around, actually underneath, that's how they were feeling. Yeah. They were feeling like a headless chicken. And how did that, but they knew they couldn't have a 5-minute video and portray that. But they also knew they needed to strike a balance between, not talking about a load of old delusional, pink, fluffy, positive stuff, which wasn't real, and being human about it. And I think I've seen quite a lot of leaders and owners of businesses recently realizing the value of just being human, not being the boss, but being the strength of their leadership comes from showing some vulnerability, humility, but still realizing they, in some way, shape or form, where they can, they need to reassure people.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think it was just reminding me of, we had some new starters who fell between the gap of having handed in their notice, and I think, so the government changed when they were allowing you to furlough from, and they changed it to 3 days before these 2 new starters started with us. And they had obviously already handed in their notice with, and stuff. So we brought them onto the team, did remote inductions luckily we trialed it once. We have a team member in Canada that we did a remote induction with, so we'd had a little bit of practice. But it's a completely different starting experience than we were used to. And then one of our values at Fountain is transparency. And so we are very, very open with our numbers. And the first company update that these team members experienced was us being really open with the worst numbers that we've had for a very long time. So I called them in advance and said, it's okay. We're showing you this because it's part of what we do every month. We're not showing you this to say, and it, I think recognizing that when I'm speaking to my team members, I am in that human space. I also think that we as employers know more about it. I don't just know sort of how my team are getting on. I know whether they have gardens. I know where they live. I know whether they're getting out to walk. I know if they have any injuries that mean that they can't exercise or any challenges at home. It's sort of a whole new human to human level that we're working in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and I think that's, I guess one could even start to think about in terms of the evolving culture that organisations and teams have, is that actually we're discovering stuff through this lockdown that will probably constructively contribute to the sort of cultures we want to have when we ease our way out of it way more than we have so far. In the same way that people are thinking about life, aren't they? Can we work from home more? Do we need to travel as much? Do we value the simple things in life way more than we did 5 minutes ago? All that sort of stuff, really. So I think the cultural focus that I know you have as a person, and certainly your organisation has. I think there's almost like I guess almost another level we might be able to move to as organisations, taking as much from this lockdown pandemic situation as we possibly can into an even more evolved, constructive culture in the future, hopefully.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're struggling with a little bit at the minute is that there's a really big narrative in the press that the office is over, and that's not what our team members want. We did a survey last week to just check how people are feeling about things, and the overwhelming response was, don't say the office is over because we want it back. But it's really hard to say, we'll definitely work on, we don't know exactly what it will look like, but we'll work on getting back to it, when it's sort of every other day in the press there's, the office is dead, sort of these examples.
Well, I'm delivering a program via webinar video link in the last sort of couple of weeks with a pretty significant client in terms of their national profile, and about 16 people from around the country are coming onto the sessions. And I was having a chat after one of the sessions with one of the managers, and she said, when we finish this program, would you run a session with my team just for about 2 or 3 hours? And I said, well, yeah, of course, I'd love to do that, but what's the nature of what you want to achieve by that? And she said, well, they are such a great bunch of people. They are so motivated. I have so little performance problem stuff to deal with. They are just such a treasure trove of a team. She said, normally, so before all this, she said Monday mornings, they are like really looking forward to going into work, to do the work they do, but also to see each other and to work together. And she said they're missing it so much. She said they have all said that even though they're doing the work from home, they are struggling motivationally and in terms of energy, etc., on Monday mornings typically, because they're not coming in, they're not seeing each other after the weekend so much, they're not really connecting, and before work starts, finding out what everyone did. There's such a high level of connection that the video stuff's great. I mean, it's allowing us to do all sorts of stuff at the minute, isn't it? So it's allowing us you and I to do this. We've had weekly quizzes with friendship groups on Zoom, like loads of people have. We're talking to our son. We've always done this. Our son lives in Saudi Arabia, so we do this with him anyway. And our daughter, who's in and around London, and with other friendship groups. So it's fabulous, but it isn't like you and I sitting around the same table, sharing a cup of coffee, is it? And that level of, we can see each other, but we almost can't feel each other quite so much in an emotional sense. So yeah, this lady wants me to do some work with their team to help them start to feel that a little bit more on a Monday morning until they do get back to going into the office. So
where do you start that kind of work? Because I guess that's one of the things that is challenging for so many people who are running businesses, is how do you address something when you can't do it in person, like motivation?
Well, I think, again, I'll give you our steer on it because of the psychological and emotional basis of the work that we do.
That's what I'm after.
Yeah, I know. So where, in my view, motivation's a feeling. You feel motivated. That then drives you to go and do stuff, to behave certain ways or do certain things in a certain way. And because motivation is a feeling, almost an emotion, you could say it falls under that feelings emotional category, we know, or we believe, that comes from how we think, our frames of reference, the meaning we give things. Now, it's quite easy and understandable in the sort of climate that we're in. If if people are, there is some good news around. So social media does have some nice to read stuff in it, some positive, constructive stuff, and there is some positive, constructive stuff on the main news and the newspapers, but there's a heck of a lot which isn't great, in my view. And some of those outlets and mediums, they'll be saying, well, this is the way it is, we're telling the truth. Well, no, you're giving a piece of information. And we sort of know bad news sells a bit more than good news. It just does. So, we come from a place of, with say the work with this team, is in as much as just getting people to realize, what is it that's influencing how you're thinking and feeling, and how consciously selective have you been about what you expose yourself to. And actually, we'd be working on some ways to help those people shift their thoughts so that they feel differently on a Monday morning. And maybe that could be things like, well, okay, we're not getting together face to face in the office, but we will be. So actually we can look forward to that. But until that day comes, isn't it great that we can do it this way? Isn't it great? Do we then start our Monday morning with a half an hour get together like this? We're not even going to talk about work. Actually, let's just forget work. We'll start work at 9 or whenever we would start. Why don't we get together at 8:30 and just chew the fat about the weekend and give each other a little bit of that sort of time? Can we make sure we have a smile and a laugh and a giggle and a funny story or whatever, just to get some of that human stuff that they normally have when they go in the office anyway? Because I think one of the things about the video thing is, this is a positive thing. I've spoken to clients that get way more done in an hour's video meeting than they do in an hour's face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
Because people are thinking, they're not thinking about, slowly coming into the room after 10 minutes, starting to pay attention. The video's on, they're there. That's great in one sense, but it also means we're probably not getting the other stuff, just the human bit of conversation, a bit of how are you and how's your son, and does that make sense? So maybe we just make sure we make time for that. But also, it's new, it's fresh, or the way of working is a bit new and fresh. Let's look forward to it. What's good about it?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that is really interesting to me, is talking to not just people at Fountain, but in other businesses as well, of finding the positives in this time, and then trying to rethink the future of how we continue to include them, how we don't let go of our enjoyment of, like, one of the things that I love, I was one of those kids that if my parents said, let's go on a walk, I'd be like, oh God, not a walk. And suddenly you've got a whole nation of people who were going for that one walk a day, became incredibly important. And I love that we have this sort of shifted consciousness to it. I think it's just a great change. And so then the challenge is how we do build that future where we include those things. We were talking earlier about, we're very lucky here in Norfolk because we have beautiful views outside our windows and space, and you know, I'm grateful every minute of the day for the garden that my 5-year-old gets to play in. I have some friends in Manhattan in a flat with 2 small children, and that's harder. Definitely.
That's a good experience, isn't it? And again, we touched on it earlier, not everyone's having the same experience or on the same journey through this. You know, there can be similarities, there can be differences, but I guess some of this sort of comes back to the work that we do most of the time anyway, in all sorts of different, against all sorts of different backdrops, that, you know, for me, it isn't about being pink, fluffy, delusional, positive, away with the fairies. It's just, there's always a load of stuff in life. There's always stuff. There's some fabulous stuff, there's some good stuff, there's some average stuff, there's some quite difficult stuff, and there'll be some really, really challenging stuff. And I think life at any one time, that's our lives and business, is a cocktail of all of that. And sometimes we'll have periods for one reason or another where there's just so much of the stuff we want happening and the world is like we want it to be, and wow. And there'll be other times we're more at the other end of the spectrum or in the middle. It's just, but how we think through all of that is fundamental to our to our experience, to how we reach the things we want to reach, to how we interact with others. And in an organizational sense, and obviously we talk about culture a lot, you know, that I believe there's a massively strong emotional impact on culture, because you can walk into a building and you can't always put your finger on how or why, but within seconds you can feel it. You feel what an organization's like, don't you? Even if no one's spoken to you yet or whatever, you can almost, we're fortunate to go into so many different clients, all over, big and small, all over the world, and you get a feeling. And I always think, oh, I'm feeling culture. So what is culture? Well, it's made up of all sorts of things, but quite powerfully emotion, how people are feeling, I think.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned before about how values are so at the heart of that, and that it's easy to be in line with your values when the sun is shining. Things are tough. So how are you working with organisations that haven't nailed those values? What can be done under lockdown to address that? I think I'm aware that so much of the work that we did on our culture before all of this happened, partly because it's my passion and I'm lucky enough to have time to work on it, it became so integral to how we were able to respond to all of this. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful that we'd set up an internal coaching program so that everyone at Fountain has a colleague who is their coach at the moment. And we rolled it out in January, and I'm so grateful that we got there. It had been on my to-do list since like the previous May, and actually having that in place has meant that we've got these check-ins happening on a really regular basis. But and the way that we're working there is hugely down to our values. But for organisations that haven't got that underpinned yet, or who have, I think a lot of places have corporate values that are potentially not lived by everyone.
Potentially, increasingly. It's not uncommon, let's be honest.
So how do you work with an organisation like that under lockdown? Is it, can you, under extreme pressure, go back to those building blocks at that point?
I think there's 2 key things I'd respond with, Rebecca. One is, what do they need to be doing with their people? Well, you know, whether we put words of kindness and attention or whatever, that leadership, you know, it's a key role of leadership is to look after your people. And we're in a situation now where we're seeing how good leadership is or isn't, ultimately. But I think it's giving people time and attention, and to sometimes be able to just say how they feel and just listen, not always provide an answer straight away or try and solve it, just to listen to people. Where appropriate, as we touched on a little bit earlier, to have the humility and but feeling okay to be vulnerable, to show that you're vulnerable, because you're a human being. Because the moment you're a staff member or employees realise, oh, as a leader, oh, they're just like me. Yeah, absolutely, we are. Or people are, in leadership roles. They feel anxious, they feel all sorts of stuff. But there's this, sometimes in our country as well too, and more of the Western world, you can't show that. You're the boss. No, we need to get through that. And I hope this experience helps more to do that. So I think there's, how can we help our people at the minute if there isn't a really clear culture? Just give people time, whether that's making the time to put a video of reassurance out, or a video which is just communicating where the company is or where we're at or what the plans are, whether it's actually taking the time to call team members or video team members, but first and foremost to give them some time and attention. I actually think alongside that at the moment, that's what we need to be doing today, those sort of things. But actually in terms of preparation for the future, could also be deciding what you want your culture to be like, to actually start that work, even under circumstances where we're under quite a lot of stretch. I think actually this is quite a good time to do it, because you're going to get real information, what it's like to feel like under stretch. And actually, if we're ever under stretch again, what would we want our culture to be? And would that culture really help us thrive when we're not under stretch? So how sustainable is that stuff? So I actually think two key things. One is please give time and attention to staff, to your team members, in a variety of different ways, because one of the ways we show we care is by giving time and attention. Same as with a child. If you don't give your time and proper attention to a child, they'll feel isolated. So it's one of the richest things we can provide. So I think we should be doing that in our businesses and organizations. And absolutely alongside that, we could be building for the future. You don't have to wait till things have calmed down and then say what you want our culture to be. You could start deciding today. And for me, and I know this is some of the work that you've done as well too, when people think, well, how do you start thinking about culture? Look at values. Values are a great place to start, because they should, if the exercise is created and worked through thoroughly and in the right way, actually they are your touchstone. And you just go back to them. You keep touching them every day in a variety of ways, and testing yourself and calling yourself to account, calling others to account, just testing ourselves against, is this how we are? So I have core values myself as a person. So these are my because that's some of the work we do on our core Peak Performance Mind program. We do that work in organizations. We also do it individually, so that people have a code of values to live by. Clear about those. And I added to my own values list 12 to 18 months ago, kindness. Not because I think I'm unkind, I need to start being kind. I just want to, it's almost like an aspirational value. I want to become more of that. And it's amazing. I certainly haven't turned into Mother Teresa or anything like that, but actually it's on my radar. I think about my values a lot. I reference them a lot. I hold a mirror up to myself for those values a lot. And it's no coincidence, my brain finds ways of being kinder to more people more of the time. It doesn't happen by accident. And the same goes for organisational values. Once we're really clear about those, and if we can get people involved in creating those become, I think, the heartbeat of your culture ultimately. So we could certainly be doing that work now.
We've had a lovely journey with our values at Fountain, because we wrote them together as a team. We'd always had very strong values internally, but they were written by the directors when we first founded, and they were very they were just sort of out of date. And then I think they maybe got rewritten by a branding agency at one point, and they were lovely, but they weren't necessarily 100% in touch with how we were working. So we rewrote them as a team. It was a wonderful day, probably one of my favourite moments in business as a day. And then we translated them into behaviours, and we put those into our appraisals. So, and that for me has been one of the big things, is that we talk about them regularly. That it's not a sense of, oh yeah, those are our values and they're over there. They're absolutely in our hearts and in how we behave and in how I don't feel like in our leadership team, I don't feel like we ever say, oh, let's check this against our values. We're more likely to say, wait a second, are we being transparent? Is that transparent enough? And it's part of our discourse and our behaviour in an active way. And in that way, they're just such valuable tools. They really are.
Yeah. But what you've done marvellously, Rebecca, is you haven't just said, we'll get people involved in creating our values and then they're on a poster or in the staff handbook. And that, let's be honest, it is like that in a reasonable number of organisations. For them to come to life, you need to live them. And we're all human. We're not going to be on it 100% every day. We're all going to have our better days and less good days. But if we talk about them, if we reference them, if we embed them in terms of looking at our actions and behaviours against them collectively in meetings and the way we go to market, in our marketing, we're giving the values attention. When they have attention, they have energy and they hopefully have life, don't they, ultimately? So I think even if people are stretched, or organisations are stretched at the minute in terms of, the perceived pressures and everything, now is actually a great time to be thinking about that stuff, or maybe even starting to work at that and plan that out. So that actually becomes part of moving out of this pandemic and into an even brighter future.
Brilliant. So I have a question for you as a leader in an organisation. One of the things that I was really impressed by when the pandemic hit was quite a few organisations, a lot of them public, were putting out messaging that were saying, we're not going to expect from you under lockdown what we're expecting from you otherwise. There was some, especially I saw some from Norway, some from some local places in the UK, and some other places as well. Some really heartfelt things of saying, we're here to look after you. This isn't going to end all of a sudden. And for example, in our business, if we don't at some point put a focus back on performance and achieving goals and those things, the business will suffer over the longer run. Absolutely. So what are your thoughts about balancing the need to start improving performance again, or, for example, the number of hours worked in a day, alongside looking after people, and that this sort of, whatever the transition out of lockdown will be, and as I say, recording this on 1st of June, so the biggest start of that is really today in the UK. But how can we think as leaders about supporting our team members towards back to the level of output that we used to be at?
You've just raised something really important, I think, in as much as when we talk about whether you call them targets or goals or objectives, whatever label an organisation puts on that stuff that people are supposed to be achieving, that actually, why is our frame of reference that there's either that or looking after people? They're not, for me, they're not different, because as an organisation, I get, obviously, we need some clients, we need some providing our products or services to those clients, so they pay us, and I get all of that. I've been in business for 20 odd years, so I know that. But actually, I think this is that is something that is in the head of a lot of people in Western culture, that if we're striving towards something that's hard work, that's 70, I'm exaggerating, that's 70 hours a week, you can't see your family, it's all or nothing, la-di-da-di-da. No, it isn't. You can have a healthy amount of that coexisting with 6-hour days if we want to, because Scandinavia is proving that. You know about some organisations in Scandinavia do 6 days or 6 day weeks. Some are making a success of that, some aren't. So I think the paradigm around how much energy in its various forms we need to invest to be successful, or we can have a life chilled out, relaxed and be healthy. I don't get that. I don't go with that at all. I think you can have both, and you can have many things, but we do require balance, evidently. And I've spoken to quite a lot of people working from home, not all of them, but they've actually said to me, they get so much more done at home. Now, of course, that depends on their living situation. Of course, I get that. But they've surprised themselves how much they get done, not by sitting in front of a PC from 9 until 5, with a break in the morning and a break in the afternoon and a half an hour at lunch. They get up and wander around, they go in the garden, they make a cup of tea, but they come back fresh, rejuvenated, and produce more. So I think what I'd love to see around so many parts of the world, and particularly in all sorts of different organisations, is is to move away from that old paradigm of we either work ourselves into an early grave, or we, I don't know, have enough money just to chill out and not do anything. Now, actually, why not just mix it all up and have plenty of all of that stuff? Yeah. I've had a current theme of focus since the latter part of last year. I'm not saying I'm successful at this yet, but it's something I'm really reminding myself regularly is, can I produce more with less? That's a question I'm asking myself a lot. Does it always have to be, if I want more, I have to do more? I'm trying to still answer that question, but I'm giving myself that challenge. Can I produce more with less, just by the things I do being more meaningful, by being more impactful? And I actually think there's a little bit of that has been occurring for people in this pandemic. Actually, they realised, you know, I can spend more time with the children and still do some stuff. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But a lot of that, I'm on one now, Rebecca, so my apologies.
No,
but a lot of that comes from, there's a brilliant book I read many, many years ago by Edward de Bono called I Am Right, You Are Wrong. And it really, many decades ago, he just dived into this two-dimensional way of thinking so much of the time. It's black, it's white, it's right, it's wrong, it's good, it's bad, that's acceptable, it's unacceptable. That's just a way we've all been taught to think, and that has helped us to create a fairly ordered society. That's why we have laws. You obey the law, you break the law. So of course that's helped us to create a social structure, and for most people, most of the time, to coexist in a reasonably peaceful way, although there are exceptions to that. But it's not really good for creativity. If whenever we're faced with a problem or a challenge, we think, well, there's only ever two ways, there's a right way or a wrong way. No, there isn't, there's multiple ways. And in our approach to work, I can either relax or I'm going to be full on and broken. No, you're not. Once you realise there's multiple ways, your brain will find them. If you think there's only ever two, you're stuck. You're going to wish you hadn't asked that question now, aren't you?
It's really fascinating, and I love that we can sort of break away from that idea of like, okay, now you need to get back to hard work. I think that's a great idea. Let's ditch that idea. Let's move on to, okay, how can we optimize the way that we are working? And I've definitely noticed among my team members that, you know, people are getting better at taking lunch breaks, which I think probably in the office were sliding more often than not. They would just eat at their desks. And partly I think also, you know, video calls are exhausting to be in all the time. Really are. And so I see people suddenly saying, actually, can we move that meeting because I'm going to need a half-hour break? Now, I don't feel like that was happening in the office. I think people would say, yep, in I go, kind of thing. But now having that focus to be able to do that. And I guess then for organisations, it's working out how you make sure that you are able. So, for example, we offer services, we sell time, and if time isn't being completed, or like how we measure the output of that time. Because obviously if you were a client of ours and you're paying us for a day and we say, oh yeah, but they did great work in 4 hours, you're probably not quite happy.
No,
so finding the balance is to try to deliver performance, but under sort of, I guess it's optimizing it rather than sort of hitting it hard, as it were.
It's you know, we're massively, it's one of the competency we teach is focus. Focus is crucial for the brain to get the best out of the brain. The question we need to ask ourselves is what do we want to be focusing on? What are our key points of focus? Well, one point of focus is, there'll be some financial focus about, we know that, money is a lifeblood that pumps through a business. And if you haven't got much pumping through, you probably wouldn't have much of a business. Or the same goes for public sector organisations. They need funding, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the only thing we should be focusing on. What are the other key points of focus if we want to create cultures that allow us to create and evolve organisations that fit people's lives, fit into people's lives, aren't all-encompassing, they need to fit people's lives and help us create the lives that we really want. That's what I really want, like people to move away from this work-life thing. Because we've talked about work-life balance. Well, it's all life, really, isn't it? It's just life.
I think over the past 2 months we all have.
Yeah, exactly. And can we as owners of businesses or leaders, and we start off this conversation around culture, can we evolve organisations where the time in people's lives that they spend at work, if you want to use that term, isn't in conflict with everything else they're trying to create and experience and feel in their life. It's actually contributing to it.
Absolutely. I think that idea that you, what was it? I remember the work to live instead of live to work conversation, where we don't want to have an organisation where people are working there in order to get it out of the way so that they can go and live. We want to have an organisation where people feel like part of their life is growing their skills, and that they have a sense of purpose, that they are part of a collective, that they have all of those things that are part of life also at Fountain, while also recognizing that families come first, and that we all thrive and do better when we have things outside of work as well. That when work becomes the only important thing in life, that is not the best path either. No,
and so much of that will either be achieved or not via the culture. It's a cultural thing. There's still, in recent years, I've worked sometimes in like London, for example, working with big companies and clients in London, and you start working with them, and it gets to 5:30, and so everyone's still sitting there, and then you sort of realise, because someone's mentioned it over a cup of coffee, that everyone's a bit frightened to be the first one to leave the building. That's culture. What a waste of energy. What an absolute waste of energy. Why don't we all just go home at 5? It's okay. Albeit we all do a few extra hours, I know, sometimes, because we decide to, because we're trying to keep clients happy, but that's culture, and people are frightened to be the first person to get their coat and leave. And they're just sitting there. Are they being productive? Not really.
Presenteeism, just...
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we'll see, Rebecca, coming through this, as you said a while ago, getting back to or returning to, or whatever phrases people are using.
Through and out the other side. And...
Yeah, it's, I hope, I really do hope, and obviously some people have had a really tragic time through this, I get that. I hope we take a lot of the good realizations and healthy realizations, and some of the extra walking and cycling and all those sorts of things. I hope we take plenty of that into the next few months and next year, etc. And we can look back on this historic period, because I'm sure there'll be kids in schools learning about history in years to come, and this will be referred to, I'm sure. But actually, it was testing, it was hard, it was tragic for some, but actually it was a catalyst and a trigger to adjust how we lived in the world. I think that would be amazing, and we should, be sad if we don't achieve some of that, I think.
Well, that's a wonderful aspiration, and I think it's also a really good point for us to end our chat. As I started our conversation saying before we hit record, we could go on talking about this all day probably. It's probably a good time to end.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with me, and I hope that we can catch up again soon and evaluate how everything is in a few months' time.
I'd love to.
Thanks so much, Gavin.
Cheers.